These past couple of weeks, we've been talking about Love Like Jesus, and although I think that was a fantastic series and would have been a continuingly great series, I really felt that this week God had a whole lot to speak to me about with peace. And so I want to start a new series at the moment, and because I can, I'm going to shift gears here and change directions, and instead of talking about love, which I think love is still really important during this season, I really think this word peace is a word that will resonate with many of us. So we've named this series Peace Amongst Panic. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to chat about experiencing the peace of God and experiencing a God of peace. And what my prayer is for you at home, and my prayer is for everyone watching online right now, is that all of us would experience this supernatural level of peace. This supernatural level an experience of an overcoming of calmness and quietness and assurance that we've never felt before. In fact, it actually causes us to ask a really important question this morning, and the question is this: what does peace mean? What does peace mean? Well, peace means a couple of things, but throughout the whole of the Bible and through my studies this week, what I've realized is that in the Old Testament, peace was kind of really driven from relationship. It was really driven between people, nations, and us and God. And so it was our relationship with other people, the nation's relationship with other nations, and the people's relationship with God. And that's how peace was sort of described. In fact, the word for peace is shalom, which is both a greeting and it's a way of saying goodbye. It's a way of expressing goodness over someone's life, that they would experience fullness and wholeness, and that they would experience success and prosperity. It was a beautiful, beautiful greeting that was around in the Jewish community, shalom. When we get to the New Testament, it's not that the word peace changes, but it does take on a different dynamic. Jesus taught it a little differently. He actually talked about the fact of experiencing calmness, of experiencing the ability to sit quietly, of experiencing tranquility is the main word. In fact, what we could say, and probably what will be our definition over this time, is that peace actually means harmony of body, mind, and soul. Let me say it a little bit better for you this morning. Peace equals harmony of mind, body, and soul. It's what happens to us when we realize a few things about God. You know what? I think that in this world right now, all of us are dealing with a sense of loss. All of us are dealing with a sense of loss. All of us are dealing with a sense of stress. All of us are dealing with a sense of panic. Your panic might be health-related right now. Maybe you're someone that's susceptible. Maybe you're someone that's a little bit elderly in age. Maybe you're someone that's in the category or the box that's a little dangerous for you to go out right now. And so you've got a bit of panic and a bit of fear about your health conditions. For some of us, maybe it's financial. Maybe we're struggling with knowing what will happen to our business at the end of this season. Maybe there's a panic that our income's not going to come. And maybe for some of us, in the most horrible of circumstances, maybe some of us have actually lost our jobs. For some of us, maybe it's relational. Maybe because we can't see people, we're panicking about what that does to our relationships. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe for some of us, the feeling of not being able to go to open house or to church is causing a spiritual panic. What I know about humanity, what I know about you, because I know it about me, is this. We want peace that deals with our past, peace that governs the present, and we want peace that holds promise for our future. We want peace that deals with our past, we want peace that governs the present, and we want peace that holds promise for our future. That's what all of us want. That's what you want, that's what I want, that's what our children want, even though they might not know how to explain it right now. That's what all of us want. We want peace, we want harmony. In fact, here's something that I found interesting, is that a lot of us here and a lot of us watching, we would actually know how to define harmony. We would know how to define peace by what it's not rather than what it is. See, not many of us have experienced peace, harmony of mind, body, and soul. But a lot of us have experienced the opposite of that, and we know that that's not peace. Harmony is also a word that we use in music. It's a word that we use to describe layers of voices, the harmonizing of voices. And here's the thing, even if you cannot sing a note to save your life, right? Even if you are unable to hold a tune, Even if you're not even able to sing harmony, right? You are able to tell when harmony's off. Because we've all had that moment where we're watching, a Carols by Candlelight or some sort of Australian Idol or Australia's Got Talent or any of those shows, and someone comes on and they sing, and as soon as their voices hit that mic, you cringe because you know that something is off. It's what happens with us with peace. It's what happens with us with the harmony of the mind, body, and soul. We don't always know what it is to be at peace, but we definitely know what it is to not be at peace. In fact, maybe some of us, we've never actually experienced peace, but we've experienced not having peace. Therefore, we know that peace is not this. We want peace that deals with our past. We want peace that governs the present. We want peace that holds promise to our future. And here's what I'm here to tell you this morning. With all guarantee, this is what I know. If I know one thing in all this world, here's what I know. I know that it is Jesus who holds the peace that deals with our past. I know that it's Jesus that governs our present with peace, and I know that it is Jesus that holds the promise for our future with peace. That's what I know. Here's how I know that. Because in the Bible, John, who was one of Jesus' disciples, he ate with Jesus, he accommodated with Jesus, he moved around with Jesus, he traveled with Jesus, and he heard all of Jesus' teachings, and he got to be able to be invited into some special, unique moments with Jesus. Here's what I know, is that this guy, John, wrote down an account for us to follow. He wrote down an account for us to understand who this person, Jesus, was, and that he was, in fact, the Son of God. And in writing this, John puts into detail some of Jesus' final remarks to us. And here's one of them. It's in John 14, verse 27. It says this: "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." I love this verse. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Jesus talks about peace numerous times in the Bible, and remember, the peace that he's talking about is the harmony of mind, body, and soul. Everything flowing together, everything working together. That's what Jesus is talking about. And Jesus actually defines something for us here. He actually sets something apart for us to think about. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Let me highlight it for you. I'm going to highlight it for you right now underneath me. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. You know what that's telling me? Same thing as it's telling you, is that there is a difference between the peace that comes from Jesus and the peace that we experience in the world. Worldly peace. What is worldly peace? Here's what I think worldly peace is. Worldly peace is often an attempt for us to escape the thing that's bringing us fear. So we rely on different tools and different mechanisms in order to escape our problem, to escape the panic, to escape the thing that's burdening us, that's bringing us down. So in our humanity and in our normalness, we look towards things like alcohol to escape. We look towards things like drugs, to pornography, to maybe unhealthy relationships. We might look at sort of status or success to try and run away from the fear that we are experiencing, to run away from the panic that's happening from within inside us. We look to distract ourselves with a whole bunch of things. This is what the world offers us in regards to peace. Temporary relief from our problems. Temporary relief from our panic. Temporary relief from our chaos. Jesus doesn't offer something temporary. In fact, Jesus' peace, godly peace, as opposed to worldly peace, does something so different. Godly peace doesn't focus on the removal of fear, but allows us to experience the goodness of life without being touched by what happens to us. Let me put that up on screen for you just for a second, right? Godly peace doesn't focus on the removal of fear, but allows us to experience the goodness of life without being touched by what happens to us. What that means is God doesn't remove the pain. God doesn't remove the panic. God doesn't remove the circumstances or situation. He doesn't pick it up and put us somewhere else in an isolated box where we don't have to experience any of these things. What God does for us, what God does for you and He does for me, is that He gives us a calmness, a tranquility to sit amongst those things and to experience the goodness of life and to not be affected or impacted by what's happening around us. That's godly peace. Godly peace does not distract you from the circumstance temporarily. Godly peace intervenes and raises us up to stand amongst the panic, but in peace. That's what the peace of God does. The peace of God allows us to face our pain, to face our situations, to face our pandemic, and to be calm, to be still, to not rise in the highs and go low in the lows, but to be balanced through it all. That's what God's peace does. It doesn't focus on removing all fear from your life. It doesn't focus on removing all pain and all problems. All it focuses on is it allows us to stand up and it allows us to experience the goodness of life. And there are still good things happening around us. There is amazing things happening around us. We are seeing love being exemplified. We're seeing parents get time with their children that they would not necessarily get to have. We are seeing so much goodness around us. And we're seeing lots of sickness. And we're seeing lots of loss. And we're seeing lots of hope being diminished. And yet, we can still have peace, calmness, tranquility. We can still have resilience. And we can still see the good things in life. Something I've been thinking about when writing this, and it's that, is the peace of God accessible for everyone? And here's what I want to tell you. The peace of God is not obtainable by those who are not at peace with God. This is the tension that we've sort of got to fight with this week. This is the tension that we've sort of got to face. The peace of God is not obtainable by those who are not at peace with God. Now, I want you to focus on the wording there, because that kind of sounds like just mumbo jumbo words thrown together, but it's not. The peace of God. The peace of God is not obtainable by those who are not at peace with God. You see, the peace of God that Jesus is talking about, the peace that He has for us, right? The peace that I have you is not the same peace. My peace I give to you, not as the world gives to you, right? That peace is not experienced by everyone. And it is especially not experienced by those that are not at peace with God. Now, look, before it sounds really negative and really down on us, I'm not trying to say to you right now that you're a horrible person and there's some sort of elitism right now, that I'm at an elite level than you and you're down here because you're not experiencing the peace of God. This is just something that we've got to recognize. That until the very first thing, the very first thing is not for you to build resiliency and calmness and tranquility. That's not the objective here. The objective here is for you to be in right relationship with God. That is the most important thing. That is what is going to breed peace in your life, is when you are outright relationship with God, where there is peace with you and God. Like the Old Testament, where there is a treaty between peoples and a treaty between nations, that there would be a treaty between us and God. In fact, in the Old Testament, looking through the Bible and trying to find words with peace in it, what I noticed is that a lot of it in the Old Testament was peace treaties. This idea that one nation would come to another nation and that both these nations would come to an agreement. That there would be a non-conflict between these two nations. We have this today. We see treaties get signed all the time. We see treaties getting broken all the time. It is so essential that we understand right now that there is a treaty from heaven that has come down to us that has asked us to make peace with God. And that treaty is the person and the work of Jesus Christ. The peace of God is not obtainable by those who are not at peace with God. What I mean by this is that the peace of God is actually not accessible. It's not being able to be experienced because we don't have peace with God. We're trying to sort of jump 3 steps ahead before we get in front of the initial step with the peace of God. And before you start throwing at me that somehow I'm trying to make this like a works thing, like somehow you've got to write your side of the treaty, it's none of that. God's grace was so good that He extended to us His Son, Jesus Christ, to die on a cross for us, so that we would take up the end of the treaty that recognizes that there is someone superior to us. See, that's what a treaty is, really, isn't it? A treaty is often recognizing that someone is elevated above us, someone is superior to us, someone is bigger than us, and we don't want them to squash us, so we're going to get on board with them. Here's what I want to tell you right now. God is bigger than this pandemic. God is bigger than the anxiety that you're experiencing. God is bigger than your health. God is bigger than your financial situation. God is bigger than your joblessness. God is bigger than all of those things, and what He requires and calls of us is for us to recognize that He is bigger than all of those things. And to rely on Jesus. To trust on Jesus, to say, you know what, Jesus, you have made an agreement of grace. The agreement, the treaty that we're about to agree to, is not on how much I can do for you. It's not who I can be for you. The agreement has already been signed on the dotted line, and it was written and signed by God Himself in the agreement of grace. When we recognize grace, and when we see grace, it calls us to understand that our God is greater than anything. He's greater than your diseases. He's greater than your worries and anxieties, and He's greater than our sin. So we can rely on Him. You see, it's more important for us to make peace with God before we will ever experience the peace of God. It is so essential today that you make peace with God. It says this in Colossians. Paul writes this in Colossians. Really, really interesting passage. It says, "For God was pleased to have all His fullness dwell in Jesus." Every part of God was happy to send Jesus as the treaty. And through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through His blood and on the cross. Wow. Making peace through Jesus. We can be at peace with God through Jesus. I feel like this whole series is pointless unless we understand this point this morning. That unless we are reconciled to God, we will never experience the supernatural peace that Jesus spoke of to His disciples. Jesus is the treaty. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the truth. Jesus is the peacemaker. I really, really want to encourage you this morning that if you want to experience the peace that Jesus gives, first of all, you've got to make peace with the God who gave us Jesus. It says this in Colossians 3:15. It's the same letter that Paul wrote. It's just a couple of chapters after. It says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Since as members of one body, you were called to peace, and be thankful." Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Next week, we're actually going to talk about the fact that we're going to talk about who rules your heart. Peace or panic, peace or panic, peace or panic. And just because we've made peace with God, it does still require us to practice peace. But that's next week's talk. I can't get into that now. Since as members of one body, you were called to peace. You were called to reconciliation. You were called to peace with God. So I only have one question for you this morning. And it is such an important question. It's critical. Not only for the rest of this series, but it's critical for the rest of the season that we are about to experience here in Australia. It's this: do I have peace with God? Do I have peace with God? Ask yourselves right now, do I have peace with God? Are me and God on the same page? Do I recognize that God is bigger? That's really what we're asking at the moment. Do I recognize that God is bigger than what's going on in the world right now? Do I understand and recognize that God is bigger than my personality? God is bigger than the mistakes and the choices that I've made. God is bigger than the conflict that there is between me and Him. Do I have peace with God? Because when you recognize those things, when you recognize that God is bigger, right? When you recognize that God is larger, that God is elevated, that God is superior, when you recognize that in your life, what you're doing is you're signing the treaty to say, you know what, God? Your ways are better than mine. Your understanding is bigger than mine. I want to be at peace with you. So how do we do it? How do we do it? Well, first of all, it's exactly what I just said. First of all, recognize that God wants peace with you. Recognize that Jesus has paved the way for peace with God. Recognize that His ways are better than your own. And the second way is this, and we're going to talk about the second way next week. Trust in Him. Trust that His ways are better. Trust that He is bigger. Trust that He is better. I want nothing more than for you to have peace with God. Jesus is our way to having peace with God. And when we have peace with God, we will experience the peace of God. What does the peace of God do? Well, the peace of God is the calmness, the tranquility. The peace of God is the ability to stand amongst all of the panic that's going on around us. It's the ability to be still and know that He is God. That is the peace. That is the harmony that we want to experience, but that is not going to come. That peace of God is not going to come until we have peace with God. First things first, peace with God. Second thing, peace of God. Next week, we're going to learn how to practice putting into place peace. But ask yourself that question again. Do I have peace with God? And as you're in like your homes right now and whoever you may be with, maybe you've done the sneaky and you got your open house there or something like that. I want you to ask yourself and I want you to ask each other. Here's your immediate point of action. Do I have peace with God? And if so, and if not, take time to pray for one another, that you would experience the peace of God, that you would experience the peace of God by having peace with God. The most important thing in this world right now, the most important thing, I know you could feel that with anything right now. You could feel that with family, job security, finances, health. You could make any of those number one. Why don't you flip the script this morning? Why don't you make number one having peace with God, and then experiencing the peace of God that goes beyond all understanding, meaning peace that goes beyond what the world experiences. That's what God wants for you, but it comes with peace with God, to experiencing the peace of God. God, I just want to pray for everyone right now. God, as we're all in our homes, as we're all a part of this crazy season, as many of us are stressing about health, our families, our finances, our jobs, God, I pray right now that we would realign ourselves and we would just look up, that we would experience peace with our God. That we would accept the fact that Jesus came and He died on the cross so that we would have peace with God. That we would recognize that God, you are bigger, that you are better, that you are superior, that you are stronger. that we would sign that treaty, that we would put ourselves underneath you and we would say, you're bigger than I thought. God, we would pray that we would experience peace with you. And then that, God, you would grant us the ability to experience the peace of you. The peace that Jesus says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, not the same as what the world does. Something totally different. God, give us peace right now. In your name we pray.